In a small town, a man disappears without a trace, and nobody can understand what happened to him. While the family actively searches for him, the local police suspect that he might have disappeared with someone else. To find the possible perpetrator and determine the whereabouts of the boy, they asked for help from an FBI agent. They hoped that he was still doing well. November 1992. City of London. State of Kentucky. London is a small town, surrounded by hills and located in the center of the tobacco state, not far from the larger city of Manchester. Many families have lived here for several generations, and almost everyone knows everyone. On the 25th of November, 1992, at 11 o'clock in the morning, the students of Pace Creek School in Manchester were impatiently waiting for the festive lunch before the Thanksgiving holidays. After class, Scotty Baker was supposed to take the bus and drive to his grandmother, where his father, the 37-year-old Donald, whom everyone called Donnie Baker, would pick him up. He worked as a truck driver, and father and son planned to spend the entire holiday week together in the truck. Scotty Baker was born on the 17th of February, 1982 in Clay County, Kentucky, in the family of Donald Baker and Ruth Rose. He was interested in basketball and sport shooting. Scotty's parents divorced a few years ago, but they maintained friendly relationships because of their son, although he spent most of his time with his mother. At the same time, Scotty was often with his father and his new wife, the 22-year-old Stephanie. The boy loved most to travel with his father in the truck. This year, Ruth, Scotty's mother, was supposed to spend Thanksgiving without her son for the first time. Ruth decided to make her son Scotty happy and drove to his school to pick him up before he got on the bus. While she was waiting in the car, she saw his sister go into the school to look for her brother. However, when her daughter came back alone and said that Scotty was nowhere to be found, Ruth thought that he had taken the bus after all, since she had not informed the school about her plans. After some time, Ruth decided to check whether Scotty had gone to his grandmother as usual, but there she learned that he was not there. Worried, she began calling the parents of his friends, hoping that one of them would know where he might be. After she was certain that none of his friends had seen Scotty, the family searched the area but did not find him. Ruth and her daughter returned to the school to find out if he had stayed there for some reason. Ruth found the principal in the teacher's lounge and asked him for help in searching for her son. At this point, all the teachers had already left, and the principal promised to call Scotty's teacher at home to clarify the situation. At this moment, Ruth noticed the registration book on the table and saw an entry that Scotty had been picked up at 11:30. The principal immediately contacted the school secretary to learn details. The secretary told that at this time, a dark-haired woman with glasses had come into the office and introduced herself as Patricia Smith. She said she had come to pick up Scotty Baker and bring him to his father. At this time, Scotty was going to the festive meal with his classmates. The secretary called Scotty and told him that he had pleasant news. He would be brought home earlier. Although the secretary knew many parents and relatives of the students, she had never seen Patricia Smith before. Nevertheless, Scotty was happy and went with the woman who signed into the book, took him by the hand, and they left the school together. Ruth knew the name Patricia because she was Scotty's father's cousin. She was surprised that Patricia had picked up the boy without notifying anyone in the family. Disturbed, Ruth realized that she knew hardly anything about her ex-husband's cousin, neither her phone number nor her address. She turned to the school principal and asked him to call the police. The Kentucky police sent 2 officers to search for Scotty. The principal gave them a photo of the boy and a list with the names and addresses of his classmates. Ruth told the policemen everything she knew. The investigators decided first to find Patricia Smith, the cousin of Ruth's ex-husband, since she had picked up Scotty from school. It turned out that Patricia lived near the school, and the policemen immediately drove to her to question her. During the conversation, Patricia explained that she had not picked up Scotty from school and did not correspond at all to the school secretary's description. Soon, her alibi was confirmed. By evening, the police had questioned all women named Patricia Smith who lived within a radius of 160 kilometers from the school. There were several, All these women were at home on Thanksgiving, and none matched the secretary's description. All had a reliable alibi. It became clear that the woman who had picked up Scotty had used a false name. Almost 8 hours had passed since the unknown woman had led Scotty away from school. Ruth tried to reach her ex-husband, Donnie, the boy's father, to find out if he knew anything. The manager of the shipping company told her that Donnie was just on his way to bring freight to Illinois. The woman asked him to tell Donnie that he should call her back as soon as possible. The Kentucky State Policemen continued their search for the boy and visited the families of his friends who were with him at school that day. One of Scotty's friends spent almost the whole day with him and remembered how Scotty left with an unknown woman. He saw how they got into a 4-door car, but could not name the model exactly. The only thing he knew for certain was that Scotty was happy to go with this woman and did not look worried. By 10 o'clock in the evening, more than 10 hours after Scotty Baker's disappearance, the investigators still had found no clues about his whereabouts. Since no ransom demands had been received, the investigators focused on Scotty's family and friends. In such situations, according to their experience, often a parent is involved, especially in custody disputes. Scotty Baker's parents were divorced, so the investigators began questioning Ruth about her relationship with her ex-husband. Ruth explained that her divorce took place 5 years ago. Since then, she and Donnie no longer had a close relationship, but for their son's sake, they maintained friendly contact. The divorce was difficult, mainly because of custody issues for Scotty. But after some disputes, they agreed on joint custody. Ruth claimed that Donnie was always good to her son when he spent weekends with him. However, she suspected that Stephanie, Donnie's new wife, might be involved in Scotty's disappearance. The 37-year-old Donald Baker and the 22-year-old Stephanie Spitzer met in August 1991 and married the following year on Valentine's Day. According to Ruth, Stephanie had been jealous of Scotty's closeness to his father for the past 9 months. Ruth added that this information came from Scotty himself, who complained that because of Stephanie, he no longer wanted to go to his father. Thus, the investigators identified several suspects: Stephanie Baker, Donnie Baker, and Ruth Rose. By midnight on the 26th of November, Scotty Baker had already been missing for 12 hours. Donnie Baker, who learned of his son's disappearance, left his truck in Illinois and set off with a friend back to London, Kentucky. Stephanie and her father waited for Donnie's return, who hoped for good news, but there was none. Despite his exhaustion, Donnie insisted on searching for his son. Together with Stephanie, they went into the forest where they often hunted with Scotty and practiced target shooting, but they found no traces. Early in the morning of Thanksgiving, Donnie and his ex-wife Ruth began hanging up posters with photos. Almost a day had passed since Scotty's disappearance, and the tension between them grew. They accused each other of hiding Scotty, but despite the mutual suspicions, they continued hanging up the posters. On this important family day, there was no news about the missing person. Only hope for the best remained. The next morning, police officers came to Donnie Baker's house to speak with him and his new wife, Stephanie. The investigators suspected that someone nearby was concealing something. A police officer conducted separate interrogations to exclude the influence of one on the other's answers. Donnie looked worried, but assured the police officer that he was ready to provide any help in searching for his son. He confirmed that he planned to pick up Scotty on the morning of Thanksgiving after delivering freight to Illinois. They planned to drive to Tennessee and return. Donnie clarified that he had not asked his cousin Patricia Smith or anyone else to pick up Scotty from school. In a conversation with the investigators, Stephanie said that she was at home on the morning when Scotty was picked up and was doing laundry with her friend Susan. Stephanie suspected that Donnie's ex-wife Ruth might be up to something. In her eyes, Ruth was jealous of Donnie's new marriage and might resort to desperate measures to win him back. The investigators also questioned the school secretary, who as the only witness had seen a woman with black glasses nearby. She was shown photos of all the women from the family, including Ruth and Stephanie, even with makeup applied. The secretary stated confidently that none of them resembled the mysterious woman with dark hair and glasses. Some time passed, and the investigators decided to conduct a lie detector test with Scotty's close relatives to remove them from the list of suspects. Scotty's mother, Ruth, was checked first. The results showed that she was telling the truth, and she was removed from the list of suspects. Next, Ruth's ex-husband, Donnie, was summoned. Despite evidence that he was outside the state at the time of Scotty's disappearance, the investigators did not rule out his possible involvement. But the results of Donnie's test were not conclusive. Hoping for help from Donnie's young wife, Stephanie, the investigators encountered a new problem. Stephanie explained that she was pregnant and therefore could not be tested on the lie detector. Her pregnancy was confirmed at the hospital. Stephanie provided a sample of her handwriting, which, like Ruth's, did not match the signature of the woman who had picked up Scotty from school. During the interrogation, Stephanie told in detail about her actions the day before. In the morning, she was at home and washed laundry together with her friend Susan. After that, they telephoned another friend. At noon, after they finished washing, they decided to visit Susan at home. Stephanie gave the investigators Susan's address so they could contact her. On the evening of the same day, on Thanksgiving, the investigators found Susan at home, where she was resting with her husband, a truck driver. The police officers asked her where she had been on the morning of that day, and Susan confirmed that she had been at Stephanie's. She also mentioned that Stephanie had telephoned their mutual friend around 11 in the morning. They had planned to spend the weekend together, but after the news of the disappearance, all plans were cancelled. Susan repeated Stephanie's story almost word for word. They were at her home, washed laundry, and then Susan noticed that she had forgotten the keys in the car. Susan's mother came and took her home. Susan also gave the investigators the phone number of their mutual friend, who later confirmed their conversation. Scotty Baker's mother remembers, "On Thanksgiving it snowed, and Scotty was not found. I stood at the window in the twilight and thought, where is my son? It was snowing, and he was probably very cold. The one who was holding him probably did not give him warm clothes. I did not even know if he got something to eat. It was the saddest snowfall of my life." On Friday, the 27th of November, a special FBI investigator joined the team of investigators searching for Scotty Baker. The Kentucky police and the FBI agent still hoped for a happy ending. They spoke again with Scotty's mother, Ruth, who had not slept since her son's disappearance. Ruth reported that she had not received any ransom demands. She also explained that she suspected her ex-husband Donnie and his 22-year-old wife Stephanie, although she did not trust Stephanie, as they never communicated with each other and only occasionally met in the store of their small town. Ruth noticed that Stephanie did not like her son, and Scotty felt a dislike from his stepmother. The FBI agent asked Donnie Baker to take another lie detector test, as the results of the first test were not conclusive. The second test showed that Donnie was not lying, but during the conversation with the agent, he expressed his concern about his new wife. Donnie said that the relationship with Stephanie had deteriorated, especially after she told him that she was pregnant, to which he reacted without enthusiasm. Stephanie suspected that Donnie loved his son more, and that was the reason for her dissatisfaction. She complained that he spent more time with Scotty than with her, especially given his frequent business trips, which left little time for the family. The situation escalated when Donnie found Stephanie's diary and handed it over to the investigators. The entries often mentioned that she believes that Donnie loves Scotty more than her, and she expressed the wish that the boy would disappear. These entries spoke of deep resentment and dislike of Stephanie towards Scotty, which led the investigators to new conclusions and directions in the investigation. The FBI agents decided to invite Stephanie to a lie detector test. Unlike the Kentucky police, the FBI also tests pregnant women. When Stephanie was asked whether she knew what had happened to Scotty, she lied. After the test, Stephanie was subjected to another interrogation, using her diary and the results of the lie detector. The investigators tried to get new information from her, but she stuck to her story. Stephanie claimed again that she had spent the entire day at home with her friend Susan on the 25th of November, the day of Scotty's disappearance. Stephanie also mentioned a phone conversation with another friend that took place at 11 o'clock in the morning, which matched Susan's statement. The time of the call was important because Scotty was picked up from school at 11:30. The FBI could not confirm the call because it was a holiday. Stephanie's behavior aroused the suspicion of the FBI agents. She behaved calmly and composedly towards Scotty's disappearance, which seemed strange since Scotty had been missing for 2 days. To enable a more accurate comparison with the visitor's signature, Stephanie provided the FBI with a second sample of her handwriting. Although the handwriting did not match, the investigators suspected that Stephanie was withholding information about Scotty's whereabouts. However, it was determined that Stephanie was not the woman who had picked up the boy from school. Stephanie's alibi was confirmed by her friend Susan's statement. On Monday, the 30th of November, the investigators visited Susan's apartment again to question her again and offer her a lie detector test. But she was not at home. The investigators began to doubt the truth of Susan's statements because her version of events matched Stephanie's too closely. This suggested that both women were acting together. To determine Susan's whereabouts, the investigators contacted her mother. Susan's mother reported that her daughter had traveled to Florida together with her husband, a truck driver. An FBI agent made contact with the trucking company in Kentucky where Susan's husband worked. The foreman confirmed that he was on his way and should arrive in Florida the next morning. The investigators suspected that Susan and her husband might have taken the boy out of Kentucky. To help with the search, they contacted a special agent of the FBI in Florida. The truck was supposed to arrive in South Florida within 12 hours, and the agents planned to receive it. Everyone hoped that the truck in which Scotty might be located was already on its way to Florida. In the early morning of the 1st of December 1992, FBI agents came to a warehouse as planned, but the truck was already there. Its door stood open, but neither the driver nor his wife Susan were to be seen. Suddenly, Susan's husband appeared and asked what they were looking for. The investigators said they wanted to speak with his wife. It turned out that Susan was sleeping in the cabin. The agents asked for permission to search the truck, and Susan's husband readily agreed. During the search, it was determined that Scotty was not in the truck, only Susan. She got out of the cabin tired and surprised and asked why she should be questioned again, since she had already been interrogated in Kentucky. Despite her surprise, she was ready to help and answer all questions. The agents asked Susan to tell everything she knew about the case. Susan said her knowledge was limited because she had never met Scotty. She agreed to go to the police station to be photographed and give her fingerprints. The FBI also conducted a lie detector test and took a handwriting sample from her. The test showed that Susan had made false statements. Her handwriting sample and the results of the lie detector pointed to deception, but the girl insisted on knowing nothing. But experienced investigators had the feeling that something was wrong and she was hiding the truth. After an hour-long interrogation, Susan finally confessed. Susan told that she had posed as Patricia Smith and picked up Scotty from school on the 25th of November. She did this at the request of her pregnant friend, Stephanie. Stephanie wanted to frighten Scotty so that he would stop meeting with his father. Stephanie was jealous of these meetings because she was pregnant by Scotty's father, Donnie Baker. On the day before Thanksgiving, the 25th of November, around 9:30 in the morning, Stephanie came to Susan and urgently asked for her help. At first, Susan did not want to participate, but after Stephanie's persistent pleading, she agreed. At her friend's request, Susan changed her appearance to pick up the boy unnoticed. Stephanie also gave her the name of a distant relative so she could enter herself in the register. Scotty had never met this relative, but Stephanie was sure that the boy would gladly go with the woman if she promised to take him to his father. While Susan picked up the child from school, Stephanie hid in the back seat of the car. The car drove north from Kentucky, and Scotty, who sat in the front seat, told enthusiastically how he was looking forward to meeting with his father. When the car was on a deserted road, Stephanie undertook some actions that may not be mentioned here. Susan continued driving the whole time. After these events, the women drove to an abandoned mine nearby and hid the evidence away from the road. When the investigators learned of this location, they received the exact coordinates from Susan. On the 1st of December 1992, 6 days after the disappearance of Scotty Baker, the police found the hidden evidence. After many denials, the boy's stepmother, Stephanie Baker, finally confessed and was arrested. The locals were shocked when they learned what the pregnant woman had done. Stephanie's accomplice and friend, Susan, was tried first. Due to great public interest, the case was moved to another district. The prosecutor of the 27th District Court of Kentucky was able to convince the jury of Susan's guilt. She was sentenced to 25 years in prison. In May 2008, she was released for good behavior after serving 15 years of the imposed 25 years. After her release, Scotty's mother, Ruth, gave an interview in which she said, "I want people to never forget what she did. When she walks down the street, everyone should see her as guilty." Stephanie Baker, who was 22 years old, could not be assigned a suitable measure for a long time. Finally, she pleaded guilty and was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Half a year after the beginning of her prison sentence, Stephanie gave birth to a child that her parents raised. Her husband Donnie filed for divorce while she was behind bars. In prison, Stephanie earned a degree in theology and a diploma in Bible studies and also married. In the year 2017, she appeared before the parole board and told her version of the events of that day. Stephanie claimed her goal had been to take Scotty to his father. As soon as they got in the car, Susan drove. When she took off her wig, she frightened Scotty so much that he tried to get out of the car. Stephanie grabbed him by the shirt, and an incident occurred. She confessed that it was a terrible mistake of her youth. Scotty's mother, Ruth, was present at the hearing and demanded that Stephanie serve the life sentence completely. Finally, the verdict remained unchanged, and her application for parole was rejected. Donald Baker filed a civil lawsuit against the Education Board of Clay County and the school secretary because Scotty was released that day without proper permission. The charges against the secretary were dropped due to her right to qualified immunity, and the lawsuit was eventually dismissed. As a result, a law was passed in Kentucky that requires identification using a photo of every person who picks up students from school. Today we dive into the unusual story of a young woman who was eager to develop a perfect plan while remaining undetected. This story takes place in Busan, one of the largest cities in South Korea, which is located on the southeastern coast. This young woman, who was obsessed with her ideas, was ready to do everything to realize them. Her strange behavior attracted public attention and became the topic of many discussions. Jong Yu-jong, a 23-year-old resident of Busan, decided in May 2023 to realize her dream and began developing a perfect criminal plan. In the library, she borrowed books about how to hide evidence and studied criminology and police methods on the internet for 3 months. Jong Yu-jong had no criminal past and was not connected with criminals. At first glance, she looked like an ordinary citizen. Therefore, she understood that her success would depend on choosing a target with whom she could not be connected. Where could one find such a person if not in a tutor search app? In South Korea, young people are under great pressure to succeed in school. Therefore, tutor apps have become very popular. These apps often offer many private teachers who advertise their services. For Cheong Yu-jong, it was the perfect place to find a mentor. Within a few days, she contacted over 50 tutors from Busan, presenting herself as a mother of a student who needs additional English lessons. After long conversations, she decided on a female tutor. The young woman was 26 years old, lived alone, and took students at her home. Acquaintances described her as a lively and kind-hearted person who sincerely cared for her students and wanted to help each of them unfold their potential. She could listen well and understand. Therefore, she probably suspected nothing unusual when Chong Yu-jong asked her, "Do you live alone?" Perhaps the future student was simply shy and did not want someone else to hear her mistakes. The tutor confirmed that she lives alone and agreed to meet in 2 days for an introductory session. Her house was located in the Gyumjong district, about 20 minutes' drive from the place where Chung Yu-jong lived with her grandfather, her only guardian and relative. 26th of May 2023, around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, surveillance cameras recorded Yu-jong walking to a teacher's apartment, dressed in a school uniform that she had ordered on the internet. She arrived at the apartment around 1734. The teacher received her warmly at the door. If she had doubts about Yu-jong's age, she had no time to express them. Yu-jong immediately went into the apartment and after a brief exchange of courtesies asked to use the toilet. The apartment owner showed her where to go, but Yu-jong used this opportunity to go into another room and check whether the woman really lives alone. 1 hour after the incident, Yu-jong left the apartment wearing the teacher's clothes which she had taken from her wardrobe. In her new clothes, she went to several nearby supermarkets where surveillance cameras recorded her purchases: garbage bags, cleaning supplies, and other items. Later, she used these items for her purposes. It is not known why she did not take these things immediately. Perhaps she thought a police officer would stop her and search her bag. Or she hoped that the woman would already have these items in the apartment. Or she simply could not plan well. After Yu-jong returned to the apartment, she immediately began thoroughly eliminating all traces of her presence. First, she took the mobile phone, the identification cards, and the wallet. Then she set about removing all evidence that could indicate her presence. She went home to get a suitcase and then returned to the crime scene to pack the tutor's clothing into 3 garbage bags. She threw these bags into the nearest garbage container. She hid the remaining evidence in the suitcase. The entire cleanup process took about 6 hours, during which she went back and forth between her house and the tutor's house 3 times. On the surveillance cameras, it could be seen how she calmly walked back and forth between the 2 locations without signs of unrest. Around midnight on the 27th of May, Yu-jong left the apartment for the last time and took the suitcase with the evidence. She hailed a taxi and asked the driver to take her to Yangsan, which is 20 kilometers north of Busan. Yu-jong loaded the heavy suitcase into the trunk herself and declined the driver's help. During the entire journey, she did not speak and avoided eye contact with the driver. When they arrived at a remote location by the river, Yu-jong asked the driver to stop, paid him, and took out the suitcase herself before going into the forest. Yu-jong's behavior seemed suspicious to the taxi driver. Who goes to a river in the middle of the night with a heavy suitcase? Yu-jong did not ask the driver to wait for her, but the taxi driver decided out of curiosity and intuition to drive around the area a little to see if she would return. After 15 to 20 minutes, he saw her returning with an obviously lighter suitcase. She hailed the taxi again and asked to be driven home where she lived with her grandfather. The authorities believe that Yu-jong did not realize that the driver was the same man. The driver followed the instructions and tried not to consider the situation as strange. Later, however, following his intuition, he contacted the police around 3 o'clock in the morning. He reported that the young woman had possibly thrown something into the remote forest and gave her address. Thus, Yu-jong's behavior that night was thoroughly analyzed. The investigators could understand her actions based on the taxi driver's information and pieced together all the facts. This helped with the further investigation. When the investigators arrived and began examining Yu-jong's suitcase, they noticed strange dark red stains on it. When asked about the origin of the stains, the girl stated that she was at that time in her monthly cycle and suspected that the suitcase might have been accidentally soiled. However, the police doubted her explanation and took her to the local hospital. The tests revealed that Yu-jong was not in this phase of her cycle and the stains on the suitcase came from another reason. After that, Yu-jong was asked again about the stains, and she invented a new story that these were connected to her pregnancy and a trip to the forest, hoping that this explanation would be more convincing. Meanwhile, other police officers searched the surroundings and found important evidence in the tall grass. The investigators brought Yu-jong for questioning, but instead of demanding a lawyer, she invented another story. She said that she went to an English lesson to a tutor and found an unlocked door. When she entered, she saw traces of the crime on the floor, and an unknown man who was responsible for it was still there. He locked the door and said that she would be fine if she remained silent and helped him. Nobody believed her story, and Yu Jong became nervous and changed her version of events again. Now she claimed that she had pretended to be a student because as an adult it was embarrassing for her to look for a tutor. When she came to the apartment, an argument arose about the learning program, and out of fear for her safety she acted, which led to the incident. After another fabricated story had exhausted the investigators' patience, they decided to contact Yu Jong's grandfather and asked him to come to the station. The grandfather was very surprised and sad when he heard about his granddaughter's actions. He had raised her since childhood and could not believe that she was capable of such a thing. But when they showed him the evidence, he could no longer deny her guilt. Since the investigators could not get an honest confession from Yu Jong, they asked the grandfather to speak with her alone. He agreed. When he entered the room, the grandfather began asking his granddaughter to tell him the truth. Perhaps Yu Jong loved her grandfather, or she recognized that the situation was hopeless. But at that moment, she finally confessed. She explained that she was fascinated by everything related to real crimes, from movies and shows to books and articles. She wanted to experience what it was like to be involved in such a case. Her emotional report impressed even the most experienced investigators. After examining her story, her tutor and the surveillance camera footage from the day of the incident, the investigators were even more amazed. They had dealt with intentional crimes, but such a case had never encountered them before. It turned out that Yu Jong was particularly interested in the Korean psychological thriller Helplessness, in which a woman commits a crime and assumes a foreign identity. Her browser history showed that she watched this movie daily. When the investigators compared her actions with the plot of the movie, they discovered obvious parallels. The thought of becoming someone else was attractive to her, considering her life before these events. After analyzing Yu Jong's messages and social networks, it became clear that she had neither friends nor acquaintances, work or family, except for her grandfather. She led an inconspicuous life. In school, she was an ordinary girl with minimal social activity. But since then, something had changed. By chance or misfortune, Yu Jong began to lead a withdrawn life and barely interact with other people, neither in the real world nor on the internet. Psychologists suspected that she was trying to escape from this situation both physically and emotionally. She dreamed of being someone else, someone who leads a fulfilling life, has their own apartment, a job, foreign language skills, and friends, someone like a tutor. Experts believe that her motive was not only curiosity but also envy. In her imagination, if she was already invisible, it seemed particularly easy to become someone else. During the investigation, the authorities contacted each of the 50 tutors with whom Chong O-chong communicated. All were young women, around 20. Yu Jong asked them whether they lived alone and whether her daughter could come to them for lessons. One young woman who urgently needed money was almost ready to take Yu Jong as a student, but finally decided against it because her apartment was too small for teaching. Now she and all the other tutors live with the thought that everything could have happened in their homes. That Yu Jong showed no remorse after implementing her strange fantasy was shocking. On the surveillance recordings made before and directly after the incident, she appeared remarkably calm and composed. Her movements were determined and confident, which impressed everyone who saw these recordings. It is difficult to understand how Yu Jong could go outside after what had happened and maintain so much self-control. When she was arrested, she had already prepared an apology for the press. In her statement, she said, "I feel sorry for the family, and I believe I was simply not myself." However, her words seemed insufficient to those who followed the case. Yu Jong's grandfather, who had raised her since childhood, moved to the center of journalists' interest. They began looking for him for interviews, and in one of these conversations he took full responsibility for her actions. He explained that his educational mistakes had led to this result. The grandfather also expressed deep regret toward the tutor's family. Everyone who knew him spoke of him as a friendly and caring person. He always tried to give his granddaughter everything necessary, and it was not easy to raise her alone. Neighbors often told of his kindness and generosity. Despite all his efforts, he now lives with guilt because of his granddaughter's actions. He could find no peace, as he realized that he had possibly made mistakes in Yoo-jong's upbringing. He felt enormous responsibility for what had happened, and this feeling did not let him rest. The story of Yoo-jong and her family triggered a broad public response. People discussed how such cases could have been prevented if other measures had been taken. Many felt sympathy for the grandfather, as they saw in him someone who had done everything he could, but still found himself in a difficult situation. Shortly before the court trial, Yoo-jong underwent a PCLR test, which evaluates the ability for empathy, impulsivity, and tendency toward a parasitic lifestyle. This test comprises 20 questions and is evaluated on a scale of 40 points. In South Korea, those who achieve less than 25 points are considered people with serious psychological problems who have no conscience. Yoo-jong scored 28 points. During the trial, she asked for forgiveness and claimed she had psychological difficulties at the time of the incident. But the prosecutors did not believe her words and declared that she had planned everything in advance and tried to cover up traces. They demanded harsh punishment, but Yoo-jong escaped the harshest penalty. On the 24th of November 2023, she was sentenced to life imprisonment. Only a few knew that a taxi driver who followed his gut feeling alerted the police, which led to her arrest. Had it not been for his vigilance, Yoo-jong might have escaped justice for a while and been able to work out a new plan. This taxi driver preferred to remain anonymous, avoided interviews and rewards, as he feared that Yoo-jong might be released early and take revenge, or that her actions could inspire others. According to reports, Yoo-jong feels quite comfortable in prison. She eats well, sleeps, and enjoys the isolation without showing signs of remorse. The South Korean media often highlight her appearance and emphasize that such a young woman could be involved in such a serious matter.